As Amina sprinted through the courtyard, her blood thundered in her ears. Treachery, she thought. Someone had betrayed the kingdom from within. By the time Amina reached the throne room, it was already too late. Her father, King Ali, lay slumped on his throne, a knife protruding from his chest. Beside him, her mother knelt, tears streaming down her face as she tried to stop the flow of blood with trembling hands. "Father!" Amina's voice broke as she rushed to his side. The king's eyes fluttered open, his breath shallow and labored. "Amina?" he rasped, his hand weakly reaching for hers. "It was Idris." Amina's heart froze. Her brother? Idris, the one she had trusted, had betrayed them? Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the truth. "No, it can't be," she whispered, her voice cracking. King Ali's grip on her hand tightened for a brief moment, then went slack. Amina's breath hitched as her mother wailed beside her. Amina moved through the palace with deadly precision, her warrior's instincts heightened by the devastation around her. Idris was nowhere to be found, and the mercenaries he had allied with were everywhere. They patrolled the halls, searching for her. "The princess must be found before dawn," one of the warriors whispered. Amina chuckled. They were looking for her, but it was she who would find them. With cat-like grace, she stalked her prey. Her sword flashed in the dim light, and before the first warrior could even cry out, he collapsed at her feet, his throat slit. She moved like a shadow, slipping through the palace. Each kill brought her closer to Idris. "Where are you, brother?" she muttered under her breath, her eyes burning with rage. Amina finally caught up to Idris in the royal stables, saddling a black stallion. His movements were calm, almost casual, as if the massacre he had orchestrated were nothing more than a game. "Idris!" Amina's voice cut through the silence, laced with fury. He turned slowly. "Sister, I was wondering when you'd find me." His voice was low, dripping with contempt. Amina's sword was drawn, her grip steady. "You've betrayed us. Betrayed me." Idris laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "Betrayed?" Father was weak. He clung to old ways while our enemies grew stronger. I did what had to be done. Father was a fool, clinging to tradition, to peace. You'd think wielding that sword makes you the true ruler of Zadzao. Power isn't inherited, Amina. It's taken. Amina's eyes flashed with anger. "You've always been envious. That father made me his heir, but you've made a fatal mistake tonight." "Have I?" Idris grinned, his eyes cold. "I'm saving Zazo from itself." Amina's grip on her sword tightened. "I won't let you destroy everything we've built." Idris drew his own sword, the metallic sound ringing through the stables. "Then come, sister. Let's end this." The siblings circled each other, their breaths steady, their eyes locked. The first clash of steel echoed through the stables, sparks flying as Amina and Idris exchanged blows. He was fast, faster than she remembered, but Amina had been trained by the finest warriors in the kingdom. She sidestepped his strikes, her movements fluid, every swing of her sword calculated. "You should have stayed in your place, Amina," Idris snarled, thrusting his blade toward her. "A woman has no business ruling a kingdom." "I'm a warrior, the rightful heir. You're nothing but a coward hiding behind treachery," Amina replied. Idris's face twisted with fury as he launched into a frenzied attack, but Amina was unyielding, blocking and countering each move with deadly precision. For a moment, it seemed they were evenly matched, until Amina saw an opening. With a swift move, she knocked Idris's sword from his hand. Before he could react, she drove him back against the stable wall, her sword pressed to his throat. "End it then," Idris spat, blood trickling from a cut on his cheek. "Kill me." Amina hesitated, her sword hovering above his neck. This was her brother, the boy she had grown up with, laughed with, fought beside. Could she really end his life? But then she remembered the sight of her father's lifeless body, the betrayal that ran deeper than blood. Her hand trembled for only a moment before she stepped back, lowering her sword. "Exile," she said, her voice cold. "You don't deserve death. You deserve to live with your failure. You'll leave Zazo tonight, And if you ever return, her eyes hardened, I will kill you. Amina turned her back on him, signaling the guards to take him away. As the sun began to rise over Zazao, Amina stood atop the palace walls, her heart heavy. Victory should have tasted sweet, but all she felt was the weight of the crown now resting on her head. Her father was dead, her brother banished, and though the immediate threat had been neutralized, she knew Zaza was far from safe. Below, the people gathered, whispering in hushed tones as they looked up at their new queen. Amina could feel their eyes on her, their hope mixed with fear. She had saved them from Idris's betrayal, but would she be able to protect them from the greater enemies still lurking in the shadows? She could still feel the weight of the sword in her hand, the memory of her fight with Idris playing over in her mind. How many more battles will I have to fight? She wondered. Days passed, and Amina's victory over Idris brought a fragile peace to Zazao. But there was unrest in the air, knowing the kingdom was vulnerable. One night, as Amina sat in the war chamber with her generals, planning the defense of the kingdom, a messenger burst through the doors, his face pale with terror. Your Majesty, he gasped. An army approaching from the north. It's Katsina. They've joined forces with the Nok warriors. Danjuma slammed his fist onto the table, his eyes narrowing. They're testing our strength. They'll find it's greater than they think, Amina said calmly. Amina felt a strange sensation, a cold chill running down her spine. She excused herself, stepping out into the night. Outside the palace courtyard, the moon was full, casting an eerie light across the palace grounds. Amina walked through the courtyard, her mind racing. There was something wrong, something she couldn't quite put into words. Just then, a voice echoed through the shadows. Amina spun around, her hand instinctively going to her sword. Standing in the moonlight was the seer, the blind man who had foretold her fate all those years ago. His sightless eyes seemed to pierce straight through her. What are you doing here? Amina demanded, her voice steady despite the chill in the air. The seer smiled, a ghostly grin that sent shivers down her spine. I come only when the winds of fate shift, princess. No, Queen Amina. You've chosen your path, but there are forces beyond your control at play now. Amina frowned. What do you mean? Is this about the invasion? You see, the Nok warriors are not your only enemy. There is a darkness rising, an ancient force long forgotten by the kingdoms of men. And it has awakened because of you. Amina's heart skipped a beat. What are you talking about? The sword you carry, the sword of Zazao. It holds more than just the legacy of your people. It carries a curse. Amina's hand tightened around the hilt of her sword. What curse? What power? The seer's grin widened. You'll see soon enough. But beware, Amina. For every victory you claim, the darkness will grow. Before she could respond, the seer vanished into the shadows, leaving Amina standing alone in the moonlight, her heart racing. The next morning, Zaza woke to the sound of war drums. The Nok and Katsina armies had arrived. Amina stood atop the palace walls, her sword at her side, her mind still haunted by the seer's words. As the enemy forces gathered at the gates, Danjuma approached, his face grim. The Nok warriors are known for their ferocity, Your Majesty. We must be prepared for a long and bloody battle. Amina nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. We'll defend the city, she said firmly, though deep down, she felt the weight of the curse pressing down on her. The battle began at dawn, and the clash of swords and shields filled the air. Amina fought alongside her warriors, her movements swift and deadly. But as the day wore on, she began to notice something strange. Every time she struck down an enemy, a strange energy surged through her, as if the sword was feeding on their lives. With each kill, she grew stronger, faster, but also more detached. The world around her seemed to blur, and the lines between friend and foe began to fade. She could feel the darkness the seer had warned her about creeping in, and it terrified her. By nightfall, Zazao's walls had been breached, and the enemy poured into the city. Amina fought valiantly, but the strange power of the sword was becoming harder to control. Her strikes became more vicious, her heart colder with each passing moment. In the chaos of battle, she found herself face to face with the Nok chieftain, a towering figure with eyes like burning coals. He smiled cruelly as he raised his axe. "I've heard of you, warrior queen," he growled. "Let's see if the stories are true." Amina lunged at him, their weapons clashing with a deafening force. But as the fight dragged on, she felt the power of the sword intensify, pulling her deeper into its grip. Her strikes became wild, uncontrollable, and with a final brutal blow, she struck the chieftain. But as he collapsed to the ground, Amina realized with horror that she couldn't stop. The sword hummed in her hand, urging her forward, demanding more blood. She staggered back, dropping the sword, and for the first time, she truly understood the curse she had inherited. She had won, but at what cost? As she looked out over the burning city, she heard the seer's voice echoing in her mind. The price of power is not paid in gold or blood, it's paid in soul. Amina knew then that her journey was far from over. The curse of the sword would follow her wherever she went, and with each battle she fought, the darkness would grow. The battle for Zazo was over, but the war for her soul had just begun. Meanwhile, in a not-so-distant kingdom, the exiled prince sat by the fire deep in thoughts. Amina's face flashed before him, the moment she'd exiled him burning in his memory. She hadn't killed him. No, she'd done something worse. She had humiliated him. He'd been stripped of everything, his title, his home, his birthright. All because of her. His loyal follower was Nasir, the former captain of Zazo's guard who had defected in the aftermath of the coup. "They're here," Nasir said quietly, glancing over his shoulder to where the emissaries from the western region awaited by a fire. Idris didn't respond right away. His gaze remained on the horizon, his voice low and bitter. "Do they know how close Zazo is to burning?" Nasir nodded. "They've heard rumors. They smell blood." Idris turned, a cold smirk crossing his lips. "Good. Let's make sure they smell it on my terms." He descended the hill, approaching the emissaries with the confidence of a man who had nothing left to lose. Bakura was the first to speak. "You look worse than the last time we met, Prince Idris." Idris ignored the jab. "You know why I called you. Amina sits on the throne only because I allowed it. I miscalculated, nothing more." Bakura scoffed, the disdain in his eyes unmistakable. "Your sister has made a name for herself already. People speak of her as a warrior queen. You? They speak of you as the traitor who ran." Idris's jaw tightened. "I didn't run. I chose to live so I could tear her down piece by piece. You think Amina can rule Zazo? You think the people will rally behind her forever? I know Amina better than anyone. I know her weaknesses. She's already made the first mistake. She let me live. She thinks she's won. Her guard is down." Bakura leaned back. "You're desperate, Idris. And desperate men are dangerous. That's why I'll consider your offer. But remember this, Prince. If you fail, we will not rescue you. We will take Zazo for ourselves." Idris's smile was bitter, but unwavering. "I won't fail." The emissaries rose, leaving Idris by the fire as they returned to their camps. Nasir approached, his expression guarded. "They're testing you. They just need to see that I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Nasir hesitated. "And if Amina..." Idris cut him off, his voice ice cold. "She's not my sister anymore. She's an obstacle, and obstacles are removed." He turned, walking back toward the camp. His time would come. He would return to Zazo. He would come to destroy everything Amina had built, and he would savor every moment of watching it burn.